Okay, Anousheh, Jared, I'm so excited to have you both here today. I've been telling everyone that I'm moderating the coolest panel because I get to talk to astronauts, which is objectively the coolest thing ever. How are you both doing?
Great.
Well.
It's wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump straight in from the very beginning. I'm going to ask a handful of questions, and I want the audience to know that I'll leave a little bit of time towards the end for one or two audience questions, so feel free to keep those in mind as we chat. I would love to just start from the very beginning. So maybe, Anousheh, if you want to start to talk a little bit about your work as CEO of XPRIZE and what it is that you're focused on these days.
So I'm very proud of having been the sponsor of the first competition, the Ansari XPRIZE, which sort of kick-started the whole commercial space industry and brought about a lot of policy changes that made it possible for this great new marketplace to exist today. And now we talk about lunar economy like it's been there forever. And so I'm proud that I was part of it at the beginning, and now we're able to see the fruit of that competition. So that $10 million brought in $100 million of investment in the teams, the 26 teams. The winning team became the technology behind Virgin Galactic, went public for $9 billion. And then right now the marketplace is estimated to be about, $500 billion, growing rapidly, depending on which estimate we look at it. And we saw this as an opportunity to take this incredible platform of competitions to bring democratized innovation to solve humanity's grand challenge. And that's what we do at XPRIZE, and we are applying this platform toward major issues in climate change, energy, biodiversity, health, education, and many other areas. So tons of prizes on our website, xprize.org, that we would love people to get engaged and involved and support and launch these prizes.
Amazing, tackling a lot of really important problems.
Absolutely.
And Jared, I would love to hear a little bit more about Shift4, the Children's Research Hospital, SpaceX. There's lots of different things you're juggling right now. Can you tell us a bit about each of those?
Yep, for sure. But I mean, just to really underscore, Anousheh's contribution with XPRIZE. I don't know if everybody really appreciates it, but like up until the XPRIZE, the only way to go into space would have been either through the United States or Russia at that point in time, period, as government astronauts. That XPRIZE, that $10 million that you sponsored, opened up the entire door for commercial space exploration, which isn't just about putting people in space. It's payload, it's satellites, it's unbelievable what that one sponsorship did and opened up, it was about 20 years ago, I guess?
Yeah.
So cool. And we were a beneficiary of it because, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And what we did with Inspiration4 was a beneficiary of that effort, 20 some odd years ago, because it gave hope to a lot of commercial space industries, one of which is SpaceX. And thanks to SpaceX and the foresight of that organization, human spaceflight has returned to the United States. And I'm not sure a lot of people realize, for 10 years nearly, the only way American astronauts went to orbit was via Russia. And now SpaceX has returned that capability to the United States. They launched Demo 2, then Crew 1, and then Crew 2, and then Inspiration4 launched, and now recently Crew 3, all in about 18 months, which is awesome. And Inspiration4 is the first all-civilian mission that went to space, so not NASA astronauts, not cosmonauts. It was for kind of everyday people that came together with the idea that we could accomplish some really cool things on orbit, but also raise funds and awareness for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, not ignoring some of the real obligations we have here on Earth. It became the largest fundraising effort in the history of the organization, a little over $250 million.
Incredible. So you were just in space back in September. Tell us about it.
It was incredible. It really, it really was. I'd say feel very fortunate to be, really one of 600 people who've been able to see the world from that vantage point. But for us, what was kind of interesting is we went to a pretty high altitude, so just under 600 kilometers, which is pretty north of the space station by about 200 kilometers. And what it did is it gave us just an interesting perspective of Earth, where you could see really the entirety of the sphere, but also space around it. And the moment that was most impactful for me was seeing a moonrise come around Earth, and it just felt like you got just energized to want to go and get out there and explore more, and really excited. It's such an exciting time in like space right now. It's definitely the second great age coming on, so that we can go back to the moon and Mars and beyond, and be really motivated to do it, because who knows, what kind of benefit it can have for humankind back here on Earth.
So can you validate the Earth is round, not
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's end that debate here and now. And Anusha, you went, was it 2006?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in space?
So mine was a little bit different, and I'm jealous of his experience for a few reasons. One, the capsule looked much cooler. The suit was amazing. You were driven to the side by a Tesla. I flew with the Russians. I flew on a Soyuz. It resembles the Apollo capsule, but smaller. The technology, very old, but very reliable. They've been the workhorse of the space station. They're the escape capsule of the International Space Station. And, while not fancy, they've flown a lot. So as SpaceX flies more, they will gain a lot more experience in the resilience of the capsule itself too. But nevertheless, the experience of just being in space, being in space station, and being able to see our world from that vantage point really helps you focus what's important in your life. You become detached for even a brief period of time, and it's like an out-of-body experience where you can see your life and the world and the universe all at once from a different perspective. And it helps you realize or think about, what is important to you and what is important in this world that you care about. And for me, that was a defining moment in my life to help me shape where I want to spend my time and energy, moving forward for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. That sounds really powerful. And on that note of how you both want to spend your time moving forward, we've chatted a little bit about, and you've alluded to this, Jared, just the immense innovation and investment that's happening in the broader sort of space startup ecosystem. And I'm curious to hear from each of you, what is really driving that innovation, and where do you think it's going?
Well, I think, really it's just you're bringing commercial industry with tech backgrounds that are thinking about things different than way maybe the government has previously. I think private industry can be phenomenal allocators of capital relative to how the government works at times, and that kind of fresh perspective is what's making like things that were previously only contemplated in science fiction like a reality now, like landing rockets back on ships, because why would you want to throw them away? But if you're planning one $250 million mission every couple of years, maybe it's not as much of a driving factor as when you're like, wow, maybe the world would be more interesting if everybody gets to go to space, so therefore I can't throw away my rocket every single time. And it's just that different way of thinking and that more efficient use of capital that I think is driving a lot of the innovation we're seeing today.
I think it also presents a sort of a new frontier for business, for humanity, for our curiosity and exploration. So I'm a tech entrepreneur as well, and dating myself back when internet was just becoming the internet, and with Netscape, people got access to it and were able to innovate. Then we created the world we live in right now, and no one could predict it back then. It was just the space of creativity and innovation, and you just opened up access to it, made it easier for people to innovate. I think space presents that opportunity, so with lowering the cost of access to space and making it easier for people to use other technology to create new types of businesses, that will mostly, to be honest with you, will benefit humanity here on Earth. I think there is room for a lot of growth, whether taking some of the industries that are currently on our planet and polluting our planet and having a tax on our planet and moving them into orbit, or just looking at resources out in space and how we can tap into the energy of the sun better, or the minerals and materials that are on the moon or on the asteroids, and help bring those back to help us here and not tap into our core energy and resources on Earth. I think it's all great opportunities for innovation. And a lot of entrepreneurs are now getting the capital investment to do those types of innovation.
Absolutely. This might be a challenging question, one that I think about sometimes as an investor, but when you think about, say, 100 years from now, what do you imagine, maybe in your greatest hopes, humanity's relationship with space will look like?
I think we will definitely have, in 100 years, I think we definitely will have a permanent base on the moon. There will be regular, transportation between the moon and Earth, and we will definitely be on Mars. But we will have outposts for exploration and understanding the rest of our galaxy and beyond. So a lot of explorative, non-manned, capabilities that we haven't been thinking about. And I think I'm hoping if we can get past our petty differences. I've been looking at the list of, what's on the agenda for the conference, and not just this conference, a lot of time. We're talking about all the risks and all the things that are going wrong and all the bad things that are around us, and it's easy to get sucked into this dystopian future. But I think if we can get past that and being in space, like Jared said, it gives us this new opportunity to relook at our universe and see it from a different perspective, and then let go of this, small things that we worry about and fight over, and then see if we work together, there's so much more out there for everyone and everything we want to do. Then there's a really hopeful future for the humanity that we can achieve in 100 years.
Yeah, I think that, the KPI we're going to be looking at is the number of people on orbit at one time. So on our mission, just a couple months ago, we set a new record. It was 14 people on orbit at one time. That's not a big number at all. 100 years from now, you've got to be measuring it in the millions. I wouldn't be shocked at all. To me, just framing it from the investor perspective, as you said, I would be totally looking at, launch vehicle providers. There's a lot to speculate for sure about what industries will really blossom in space, but you have to get mass to orbital velocities, and that's 17,500 miles an hour. That's very, very hard to do. So the organizations that get really, really good at that would probably be the ones I would be betting on, because whatever the idea is that's going to be up in space, whether it's Earth orbit or lunar orbit or outposts, somebody's got to put it there, and that's a big challenge. So, and it's an interesting time now because there's a lot more commercial launch vehicle providers that have formed, at least and made their public debuts in the last year than we've ever seen. That's pretty cool.
Awesome. I'm taking notes as an investor. I'm going to be able to send those back to the rest of my team. I wanted to do a pulse check with the audience and see if anyone has any questions that they're hoping to ask. Okay, it looks like we have one right up here. A mic is coming to you.
Hi, Rich Gallivan with Mizuho. I'm curious, you just mentioned 14 people in orbit last month, million or millions. How do we not screw it up? Meaning, I grew up in Southern California as a kid, orange groves, no traffic. By the time I was going off to college 35 years ago, I never moved back. It was terrible. Now the Bay Area, traffic. I'm just thinking traffic patterns. How do we prevent ruining the great frontier? And collectively, how do you make money by not screwing up too?
So I think one way to look at this is there is an opportunity for us, because there is no laws right now describing how we should build our new societies in space. There's an opportunity for us to not be bound by a lot of things and just start a whole new type of society that's built on different principles, that we take the best of what we've learned and then build on that, versus bringing a lot of baggage with us, laws that are outdated, that are not applicable, that do not serve us well. I think, again, looking at humanity as one entity versus multiple entity, collaboration, all of those things will serve us well as we build new colonies and societies in space. So I think that would be an important part of it.
Yeah, I'd say from just a congestion perspective, there is an awful lot of space to work with. But that said, like, I mean, the number one thing is like, you can't have a conflict in space. You can't have any sort of shooting kinetic war, because you can see already one satellite that was taken out just a couple weeks ago. It delayed a planned spacewalk on the space station just this morning, and it created an emergency at the time. That was one. You start taking out a bunch of satellites and really screwing up the environment in low Earth orbit, you have a problem, because even a small amount of debris traveling that fast, colliding with something else traveling at the same velocities, can be catastrophic. And then you're back to a weight equation of that's what you have to put on. I mean, that's the whole game of getting stuff on orbit is taking mass up. So now if you have to reinforce everything, to withstand impacts from foreign satellites that were blown up or something, that's just going to add more cost and delay this whole dream that you have of opening up space for everyone. That said, like I do think like if it does get to the point where we have millions in space, it's going to be people working in space. Like this has been a bad year in terms of like characterizing everything in like space tourism. I don't think people, no matter really how much costs come down, are going to be going up solely for a sightseeing perspective. I think we're going to be accomplishing things there, whether in like pharmaceutical or just other individual national interests, or who knows what the ultimate space economy will be. But I think if we get to millions, it's going to be people being pretty productive up there versus looking out the window.
To that end, and thinking about this idea of going from in the dozens number of folks that are able to go to space to millions, we've talked a little bit backstage about equitable processes to allow more people to have access to space. And I'm curious what both of you think about when it comes to what is it that people need to ultimately have access to space? Is that more education? Is that capital? Is that diversified processes through which we find people who are interested? I'd be curious to hear both of your thoughts around what needs to shift in the future for a more equitable space kind of exploration.
So when we look at the aviation and the cost of flying, it wasn't accessible. It was something that was only for the richest. And over time, with competition and reduction of the cost and increased safety, then it became more accessible. So I think the same thing could happen in space. We're on the right path. We are dealing with larger numbers. It will take longer to come down. Ultimately, I think we need to come up with a different way of going to space, so not with just rockets, but a different way that would lower the cost significantly. So if we want to talk about human transportation, at some point there were like talks of space elevators or something that is very regular, something that people can buy a ticket, like a business class ticket, and be able to go to space. But it requires a lot of innovation that needs to happen. I don't think it has anything to do with education. I would look at it as a transportation issue, not another technology issue.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you just got to keep bringing the costs down, and we're seeing that now. That's why it was the first time that you didn't have a world superpower put people on orbit. That's good, and as costs come down, the KPIs will go up, and in terms of the number of people on orbit, more people have opportunities to it. But it's also, I do think there is somewhat of an education element to it too, in that space is actually able to solve for it. So this report might be a little bit dated, but there's some like 400 million, I think, school-aged people across the world that don't have access to broadband connectivity. And if you think about what, like, say, SpaceX is doing with Starlink or any of the other, providers out there that are looking to use low Earth orbit to bring like high-speed connectivity to parts of the world where you're just not running a cable modem or a DSL line or something, you're giving access to information, which I do think is kind of foundational to solving a lot of the world's problems. But it's also going to give people, background in STEM, which could open up opportunities for going to space.
Absolutely. Anousheh, Jared, thank you so much for taking the time, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.